If the police come to your house with guns drawn, don't come to the door with an airsoft rifle because what you doing?
Hi everyone, welcome to today's bonus badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I'm your host, John Correa.
I'm your co-host, Mike Bulliver. Today's video comes to us from the Los Angeles Police Department.
Firearms Legal Protection is who I trust to help me after a use of force incident. If you're a Firearms Legal Protection member, you can attend our monthly Active Self-Protection training seminars for free. Check out all they offer to their members at the link below. Officers have arrived at this home. I realize this looks like it's been filmed on a potato. I apologize, but they arrived here because they've gotten 2 calls about ongoing domestic violence that they say, this caller says, my dad's beating up my mom. He's beating me up when I tried to help. Now, the reality is that's actually a ruse, and it's a ruse by the caller who is 19 years old because he wants to die by cop is what he wants to do. And so they are going to walk up, and then you're going to see them come out and away, immediately draw their firearms and end up getting into a gunfight, which is just off camera here with this young man who points a rifle at them and then gets shot multiple times. We do have both officers' badge cams, so let's listen into those.
You got what?
All right.
I'll do a door knock, all right? Yeah. I got you covered. Hey, wait, put that down! Put that down! Put out the help call, put out the help call! Hey, put it down, put it down! Put it down! Let go of the gun! Let go of the gun!
18-17, shots fired.
Watch right, watch right, watch right!
I'll do a door knock, all right?
Hey, wait, put that down! Put that down! Put out the help call, put out the help call!
18-17, officer needs help.
Put it down! Let go of the gun! Let go of the gun!
18-17, shots fired. Officer needs help.
Hey, get back, get back, get back! Get back, get back! Get back, get back! Get back!
¡Para atrás! ¡Esperen allá! Ahorita hablamos con ustedes. ¡Esperen allá! ¡Sacó rifle! ¡Esperen ahí! Ahorita hablamos con ustedes.
Let go of the gun! Let go of the gun, dude!
¡Sacó rifle!
Let go of the gun!
18-870, repeat your location.
I got it. 18-17, 4 West 102nd Street. You good over there?
I'm good over here. This is the family.
I got him right here.
18-817 is an RA needed. Healthy supervisor is ready to identify.
Hey, you got it, dude. I can't hear, man.
Suspect is down, still holding on to the firearm. Hey, let the gun go, man! Let the gun go!
Which way do you want us to respond?
Let him know where I got this covered. Just go comms all the way.
18-817.
¡Ey! ¡Señor! ¡Muévate ahorita! ¡Muévanse! ¡Muévanse ahorita! ¡Muévase! ¡Muévate ahorita!
Turns out that the rifle was an airsoft gun. The officers held on him here and waited for more backup officers to arrive. They did get him into custody. Unfortunately, the wounds that he received proved fatal. He did not make it out of this one. Nobody else was harmed, and there was no evidence of domestic violence in the home. Hey, listen, from a legal perspective, as well as just a common sense perspective, you can't tell if that's a real gun or not in that short a time period. So, again, it's reasonable belief. Let's talk about it. Mike, I think this trend of suicide by cop is just atrocious, quite frankly. It's terrible for everyone, but I think officers have to be ready that this is a known thing that people are doing more and more.
Couple things, John. If you're watching this and you're having thoughts like that about self-harm, get some help. Call a suicide hotline. Please don't do this, whatever you do. Yeah, it seems like it's becoming more common, John. I don't know if that's anecdotal or not, but I think the young man probably chose for his fake crime in progress DV for a reason. That way he probably knows these officers already be amped up and expecting trouble and on edge. That's probably why he said DV versus anything else.
Yeah, and you could clearly see right here as we've stopped it that he's pointing a rifle at them. And I will say this, you know, some people were up in arms in Los Angeles over the fact that it ended up being an airsoft rifle. There is no way for the officers to see that in the moment. It is meant to look realistic. It looks realistic, and a reasonable person would believe that it's a real rifle that he is pointing at them. And so I certainly think without any question these officers are justified to use deadly force to defend their lives.
Yeah, it's one of those things, John. No matter how many times you and I have a video in which somebody pulls a replica gun and it looks real and they end up getting shot, people are still going to have that sort of ostrich mentality where, well, it was a toy gun, they should have known somehow. The cops don't have Superman vision. They can't know what's in the mind of this person. Now, if they walk up to what they think is a domestic violence call and an adult male comes out holding what appears to be a rifle, they're in their mind, they're probably thinking, uh-oh, someone in there probably just got shot and is either dead or dying. That's going to be in the back of their head probably for the rest of this incident.
Oh, for sure. I mean, no question about that, right? I mean, domestic violence is the most dangerous call that any law enforcement officer goes on any given day. Now, we think about the officers on their approach here. It's just a hard spot to come, right? And you notice here, one thing that I'm going to say, that as everything pops off, this officer ends up pointing a firearm right at the back of his partner. And listen, it's a chaotic moment, and so I don't want to give him too much garbage about it. I will say, though, that this is one of the reasons that trigger finger discipline is so important, because you have to violate all the rules of safe firearms handling in order to have an injury from a negligent discharge. So it's pointed at the guy's back, it's loaded, but if he doesn't press the trigger, thankfully nobody gets injured. But this is why we practice this stuff in training so much of muzzle aversion techniques, so that we have less risk of this in real life.
Yeah, that's actually a great training point, John. So if you're watching this, I know in my career, I have, through no fault of my own, pointed a loaded gun at someone's feet or back at some point in the stick on a search warrant. It was very brief, but it happens. So 100%, John, critical that you keep your trigger finger high and in register at all times until you're ready to shoot. This was a very dynamic, volatile situation. This officer in front moved very quickly, so I'm not going to give this officer a hard time about this momentary covering his officer with a black hole like that. It unfortunately happens, but as you said, John, if you're practicing all the rules of firearm safety, the chances of someone getting hurt are very, very slim. And I just want to point something out here, John. You know, these guys were well within their rights to open fire immediately had they decided to do that. I know some people accuse me of being Mr. Trigger Happy, former Fed or whatever. Absolutely not the case. I'm glad that they tried to give this young man a moment, an opportunity to rethink his life choices instead of just blazing open fire and blazing away. In fact, they moved offline, they got behind cover, and you know, this young man was determined to have the outcome he wanted, and so he pressed the issue to the point where they had to fire. So kudos on them for at least trying to give this kid an extra moment to rethink his decision.
Now, I want to see the words on screen here. Put out the help call. No, I disagree. Stay off the radio. You literally have everything you need to handle the problem right with you, and no one is coming to save you. Officers, hear me. I need you to forget about the radios. We're make this call all the time on the channel. Nobody is coming to save you. Everything is up to you and who is there. So just deal with the problem. Communicate is after the problem is completely handled. Now, you can see the guy coming and pointing a rifle at him, and this is where the first shot is fired. Now, you know, he handled his business. This officer did a fine and exemplary job, but he made his job harder and he put himself at more risk by missing these first couple of shots. And now I get it, man. This is a real life situation and his life's at risk, and so you're going to make mistakes. But this is why you got to train to a very high level and higher than what the department is going to train you, because if you put those first shots in him, it decreases the risk against you rather than having to regroup yourself and go for it. That's why you got to be good.
Absolutely. You know, John, the people will say, and they'll be correct to say, this is a very high stress situation. It's the most dynamic, shifting, stressful environment you can be in. Well, guess what? Every time you're in a shooting in real life, it's going to be a dynamic, stressful environment. So as John said, you've got to get your training, your marksmanship, and your stress inoculation. your combat breathing, all these things will come together in this moment if trained highly enough and you get proficient enough to the point where you don't miss those first 2 rounds. Those first 2 rounds are hits. And potentially, not for nothing, if the first couple of rounds hits and this kid decides, I want to stop what I'm doing and drops the rifle, maybe it's a different outcome. Maybe he doesn't have as many holes in him at the end of the day because those first couple of rounds led him to change his behavior and stop doing what he was doing in the first place.
Yeah, that would have been ideal. I will say, though, here in this particular case where we see it frozen right here, Mike, that this guy is still moving. He still has a rifle in his hand, so he's down, but I don't think he's out of the fight. And while I don't think it obviously wouldn't have made a difference in the outcome, it wasn't a real rifle, but the officer probably, in my opinion, should have kept on this guy because he's still got control of the rifle that can still shoot these officers. I'm not saying that, he was wrong or egregious or any of those things, but I think continuing to fire would have been justified here.
Concur, justified for sure. Of course, we're not seeing exactly what he's seeing because that, the trash can's in the way. But if this is me, the only thing going through my mind right now is that rifle's about to be pointed at me and fired, So odds are, if I had the slightest thought that he was still in the fight and still trying to kill me with what I at that point believed to be a real AR-15 with rounds that'll go right through my vest, I'm gonna shoot until he stops doing what he's doing completely.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, especially he's got a rifle that's going through your soft armor, so you got to take that into account. And again, God bless him, and I think he did a fine job. I'm just saying that I think he probably could have and maybe even should have shot more. Now, the primary officer here, again, man, this approach, there's just nowhere here to be that's a good place. It just doesn't exist. And now, what do you do in this instance, Mike, when you got, do I get a shot on this guy? I'm at a DV call, a guy comes to the door with a rifle, and do I shoot this guy or do I get to cover? And you've got to make that decision in literally a heartbeat, a quarter second.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Either one of those would have been an appropriate reaction on this officer's part. I got to say, we talked about this, John. This is a terrible approach. Not his approach was bad. His technique was bad, but the approach angle, there's no good angle to come at this place. You have that recessed porch. It's a little bit of a lighting issue there. And there's 0 things in between the front gate and the front door for cover. There's not even concealment. There's nothing. So I think in this split-second decision he's making, I want to say that either he was worried about potential political winds that are shifting in the Los Angeles area as far as the prosecutors go and what they think about police shootings, or more likely, he thought, I don't have to shoot this guy right this second. Let me get some cover and try to. I'm sure his next thought was, if I can, I'm going to try to open up a line of communication, talk to him, negotiate with him, something. But as we know now, in hindsight, that didn't happen. Let's talk about the LAPD radio. This is driving me absolutely bonkers. Apparently, no one in LA is watching our videos, or they just refuse to spend the money on some sort of external mic for the microphone. Listen, first of all, stay off the radio, period. If you have to get on the radio, hit your EMR button and call it a day. You're about to be in a gunfight, or so he should assume, not knowing this is a fake rifle. You're about to be in a gunfight, dude. Get that radio out of your hands, get everything else out of your hands, and get on your grips, get on your sights, and prepare to have what may be the last thing you do in your life. You're about to be in a gunfight. Stay off the radio, please. No one is going to get there in time to change the outcome of this thing. It's all going to be done by the time any cover shows up. I don't care if they're a block away.
So that's my big thing here, Mike, is that when he's on the radio, he's out of the fight. So now you have left your partner in a deadly fight by themselves for you to have your time spent on the radios. And I think that is just an egregious error. I think it's a trained error. I think it's something that I see it all over the country. Listen, you have taken yourself out of the fight. Now you've left your partner there all by themselves. You have to stay mentally disciplined to say no, stay in the fight and win it, then we'll communicate.
Yeah, and I think, just to be clear, John's not criticizing this officer. As he said, this is a trained behavior. It is a learned behavior. He was taught to get on the radio the second this stuff breaks out and say whatever he has to say. I don't know if there's a department policy that you say those words, those magic words, the moment a gunfight begins so that you can mark the time for dispatch. I have no idea. Stop saying shots fired on the radio. Stop saying officer needs help on the radio. If you have an EMR button and you have time and opportunity, go ahead and hit it. Otherwise, you're in a gunfight. Act like it.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, split-second things happening here. I will say kudos to this officer for, averting his muzzle. Kudos to him for having really good muzzle discipline. And also, this is why we teach multiple low ready positions. You know, this is a very low ready. Why? Because he's behind his partner. So he gives good priority of fire to his partner. And I think he deserves commendation for that. That was a really good decision, not trying to wing a shot over the shoulder of his partner and averting his muzzle.
Yeah, and I got to say something, John. In this moment, there's been shots fired by one of the officers. I guarantee you neither one of these officers knows if that rifle's been fired or not. Auditory exclusion being what it is, to where your brain kind of shuts off your hearing to the point where you don't hear things like gunshots or train whistles. They don't know the status of this guy. They don't know if he's shot yet or not. So the fact that he had the wherewithal and the presence of mind to exercise that muzzle discipline tells me that that's something he has trained over and over and over again to the point where he can't get it wrong. Let's talk about the family members. I'm not going to criticize these family members for coming out. They know their sons probably.
I mean, they hear gunshots.
Yeah,
they had no idea what was going on.
Sure, their sons probably, they have some suspicion that he's contemplated suicide. Maybe he's tried it before. Now the police are hearing gunfire. Of course, they're going to want to rush in. I certainly would, to see what's wrong with their son, to see how he's doing. But if, God forbid, this is you and someone you love has been shot by the police, there's other options besides yelling at the cops. And I think in this moment, if I'm dad, I realize that these cops are probably waiting until they have more people there to make sure this kid doesn't jump up and shoot him with a rifle they still believe to be real. So if I'm dad, I know it's a toy, and I see my son's bleeding to death, I'm kicking the rifle out of there to show the officers there's no more weapon, and I'm getting to work on my son. They're probably not going to shoot me in the back, but if they do, they do. This is my son. I'm going to do what I have to do to try to protect his life.
Yeah, I think, that's the big lesson here for us as private citizens. Obviously, mom and dad, I don't think they knew that their son was suicidal in that moment, or at least actively. They didn't know that he had made the phone calls and those things. And of course, they just hear gunshots, and all of a sudden their son is in their front yard bleeding to death. People do crazy things when under this kind of stress, and they do things that make no sense whatsoever. And I think you're right, Mike. I think the big thing here is to kick that rifle out of the way, or stay out of the way, right? Just don't enter into the scene at all. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. But if you feel like, no, I need to go and get help for my son, go kick that rifle out of the way and bust the IFAK out. And are you going to catch some heck for that? Yeah, probably. But, it's your child. You just got to do what you got to do there. So maybe that's what you have to do. Anyways, I think these officers, they got put in the worst spot imaginable. I think that there's nothing they were going to do to get away from that. God bless them for doing their very best not to have to shoot the guy and giving him every chance. And what a chaotic situation. Let's make sure we learn those lessons and better cover our ass.